Shalom, shalom to all. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. This is 24 hours of limud Torah, of study, of prayers for the merit of our chayalim, in memory Leilui Neshama of the holy fallen soldiers and those murdered, and with a prayer on all our lips for the for the return of the hostages. The topic I've taken is Chanuka lights, a healing a divided society. And I'm going to use sources, and then I'm going to speak about what is going on in Israel. So let me share. One moment, please. Yeah. Let me contrast Shabbat candles and Chanuka candles. And let me learn from the contrast. Let me learn today from the contrast. Chanuka candles, we're going to evaluate by the place we light them, by the time we light them, and the purpose we light them, that we light them. And let's look at the same three things regarding Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim, Siman Reish Samach Gimel, says as follows. I'm going to read this in English, but if you are fluent in Hebrew, please read the Hebrew, and afterwards you can get these sources from the Nishmat office. The Shulchan Aruch says, both men and women must have in their houses Shabbat candles. Even if they do not have what to eat, they must beg at doors and take oil and light Shabbat candles, because this is part of the mitzvah of rejoicing on Shabbat. Why do we light Shabbat candles? Because of Oneg Shabbat, the mitzvah of rejoicing on Shabbat. And there's no peace in the home. There's no shalom bayit without Shabbat candles. Those who light within the house but eat in the yard, think to yourself of summer, and you'd like to have a meal on the patio, in the backyard, in Israel on your Merpeset. So you light candles in the house. It's way too windy to light candles outside. Or rarely can you light candles outside unless you're in a guarded space like a sukkah. So the Shulchan Aruch tells us that Hamadlikim bezavit zaviot habayit va'ochlim b'chatzer. Those who light within the house but eat in the yard, if the Shabbat candles are not long-lasting, such as they remain lit until the night, they have blessed in vain. It is a bracha levatala. So what have we learned here? We've learned that Shabbat candles you must use. If you don't use Shabbat candles, the bracha on Shabbat candles is in vain, because the purpose of Shabbat candles is that they be utilized, and when they're used, they contribute to Oneg Shabbat and Shalom Bayit, to joy of Shabbat, and to peace in the home. The Ramah comments on that the primary mitzvah is lighting candles on the table, not in the remainder of the home. And we're going to see a striking difference between this and Chanuka. Where should you put your candles? Many of us put our candles near the table, not on the table, because there may be toddlers around who pull at the tablecloth and it's not safe. For years, I watched my mother lighting candles on the table, always on the table. I and my daughters light candles near the table for reasons of safety. Thank God the house has young children there, and also we sometimes change the tablecloth during Shabbat. But the ideal is candles on the table in the most central place of the home. And Aruch HaShulchan, I wouldn't call that a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, but a more modern day codex, says the honor of Shabbat, Kavod Shabbat, is that there be candles at the time of the meal. It's not merely that the candlestick should be on the table. It is that the candlestick should be there the candles should be there, and they should be burning when we are having our Shabbat meal. Contrast that with Chanuka. Chanuka, as you may know, does not have a tractate in the Talmud. The story is not there in the Talmud. It is a question that everyone asks. We light candles in order to publicize the miracle. But the story, there's no Haggadah. On Pesach, we have a Haggadah. We have the story. We tell the story. It's the mitzvah to tell the story long into the night. On Hanukkah, the story seems to be taking a back seat. We are celebrating, but we're not telling the story. But on the other hand, it's a mitzvah to publicize the miracle. Miracle? What miracle? What miracle are we publicizing if we're not telling the story? The Pirsumei Nisa of Pesach is to tell the story on Pesach. We'll talk later about, so how do we perform publicizing the miracle if we don't have a text that we're publicizing? There's no text in the Talmud. The text is there in the Apocrypha, in the books of Maccabees, which were very popular amongst the Jews. And it's there in a concise sense in our prayers on Hanukkah, but it's not there in the Talmud. However, there are a few pages in the tractate Shabbat in the Talmud, and one of them speaks about when we light candles and where it must be. So source number 4 tells us, Mitzvata mishatishkach hama ashetichle regel min hashok. The mitzvah of the Hanukkah candles is from sunset until the last people leave the marketplace. There's this marvelous story. I think it's possibly about the Brisker Gaon, who was several days before Hanukkah, was online in the Edison movie house, and he had never before been seen online across the street from his home in the Edison movie house. Well, he wanted to know when the last performance was, so he would know how much oil he needed to put in his Hanukkah menorah, because one should start the burning of the candles at the time of sunset, but then they should keep burning until the last people leave the marketplace. I go on and read. Our rabbis taught Tanu Rabbanan. It's a mitzvah to place the Hanukkah candles beside the entrance to his house, outside. If he lived in an attic, he should place it in the window nearest the public street. And in times of danger, it's sufficient to place it on his table. So the placement is precisely opposite Shabbat. On Shabbat, you need to put the candles on the table or as near the table as possible in the house. And if you're eating outside and the candles are in the house and they burn out before you return to the house, it's a bracha levatala. It's a bracha that is corrupt because you're not blessing anything. The blessing needs to be upon the family, the house, the table. The purpose is shalom bayit. On the other hand, the mitzvah of placement of the Hanukkah candles is something we did not do in its intended fashion for 2,000 years. I grew up in the United States, and we clustered around the window. We lit the Hanukkah candles as a family at our window, And then our neighbors, who very often had a tree in their home at the same time, or their tree could have been also decorated outside. Maybe they had to. So we passed by their tree, while in our house it was the window that was lit up. And on the other hand, the core mitzvah is placing it not within the house, not on the table, but outside. And on the other hand, if you live on an upper story, if you live in an attic, says the Talmud, so you place it on the window facing the street. And in times of shmad, in times of danger, you can put it on your table where nobody is going to see it. The Shulchan Aruch says we place the Chanuka candles outside, beside the entrance nearest to the public domain. Now that's really clear. The entrance is intended to be at Reshut HaRabim. If there's a yard, we place it at the entrance to the yard. In other words, there's the house, there's the yard, and then there's the entrance. And the intention is that the candles be where everybody can see it. And the person who lives on an upper floor, which has no entrance to the public domain, he places it behind the window, beside the window that is nearest to the public domain. And then we go on to here, during the time of danger, when it is prohibited to perform the mitzvah, he places it upon his table, and that is sufficient. Now we get to a halacha, which I, for many years, had trouble with. And then suddenly I said, I understand. The halacha is after we hear that we need a shamash, so that if we use the menorah, we're not using the Chanuka candles, we're using the light of the menorah. But then we hear, menicho lemala migimel tfachim umitzvah lehanicho lemata miyud tfachim. We hear that the Chanuka menorah should be placed above 3 hand breadths. The hand breadth is with the thumb erect, you measure the distance of the average man's hand. The woman's hand is usually smaller, but you measure from the lowest part of the hand to the tip of the thumb, and that's what's called a hand breadth. 3 hand breadths are one atop the other. You should put the menorah higher than the ground, but on the other hand, it is a mitzvah to place it below 10 hand breadths. And this was counterintuitive to me for many, many years, because I said to myself, the menorah is supposed to be outside. Okay, I have to part from my childhood memories, which are so dear to me, of lighting in the window, and the family needs to go outside and light the menorah outside. But why do we have to put it low? Shouldn't the menorah be as high as possible so everybody could see it? And the answer is, well, if we want to use the light, it should be high up. But if we want to send the message that this light is not utilitarian, this light is commemorative, we're supposed to see it but not use it, and reflect upon it, then it should be high enough off the ground that we see it comfortably, but not so high that it illuminates the street for us. The purpose is not illumination. The purpose is an inner illumination. And for that inner illumination, we don't need or desire it to be higher. So what do we make of all this? We have On one hand, we have on the one hand the Shabbat candles, which should be on the table or as near the table as possible. They need to burn during the meal. Can't light them for the meal because it's already Shabbat. So we need to have candles which are large enough or enough oil within our candles so that it burns for the duration of the meal and it illuminates the meal for the purpose of our use. The placement, the time, and the purpose. If we don't use those Hanukkah candles, Shabbat table candles, we haven't performed the mitzvah. So if you are eating at friends, one needs to have enough the candles that are large enough that when we return home from our friends, they're still burning and we can have a cup of tea there. And we can enjoy the light and use that light because that's the purpose of Hanukkah, of Shabbat candles. Hanukkah candles, on the other hand, we're not permitted to use them, just to see them and have the warmth and the light within us. But it's more than that. We need to light the candles when people are as long as people are outside, our candles should be burning. And we should ideally be lighting them not just at the window, but in the public domain. My friends, this is very interesting because Hanukkah is actually celebrating the Chanuka of the Mizbeach, the Chanuka of the Chanuka of the altar. Look at source number 8, which is Megillat Ta'anit. Megillat Ta'anit tells us, Megillat Ta'anit comes from the period of the Tanaim. It's quoted in the Gemara from time to time. It's quoted within Halakha. It has the status of the external Mishnayot, similar to the Tosefta. And in Megillat Ta'anit, we're asked, Megillat Ta'anit counts the holidays of the year according to the months of the year. All of the days of celebration that were celebration of deliverances that took place during the Second Temple period, they're all there in Megillat Ta'anit, as well as, of course, Chanuka. So we're asked, why did they establish Chanuka for 8 days? Indeed, the Chanukah Moshe celebrated was only 7 days. When Moshe consecrated the Mishkan, the tabernacle, it was 7 days. It wasn't 8 days. Why was our Chanukah set to be 8 days? As regarding Moshe, we're told, they didn't leave the temple for 7 days. Likewise, King Shlomo celebrated the consecration of the Mikdash, the temple, for 7 days. Why? Chanukah is 8 days. But in the time of the Greeks, the Maccabees entered the temple and built the altar and covered it with plaster and repaired the sacred vessels of the altar and occupied with it for themselves with it for 8 days. Megillat Ta'anit doesn't tell the story of the Pach HaShemen, doesn't tell the story of the menorah. It tells the story of the Mizbeach, of the altar. And Chanuka is short for Chanukat HaMizbeach. We sing that in Ma'oz Tzur, for the consecration of the Mizbeach. However, the consecration of the Mizbeach took historically a back seat to the miracle of the Pach HaShemen, the miracle of the oil that burned for 8 days in the Mikdash. If you look not at Megillat Ta'anit, but look at the Talmud in Shabbat, you'll read, Mai Chanuka, the Tanu Rabbanan, B'kafei B'kislev, Yomei de Chanuka, Tamnaya Inun, Delo Mispei Bahon, Velo Litanot Bahon. What is Chanuka? For our rabbis taught, on the 25th of Kislev, there are 8 days of Chanuka on which we don't eulogize and don't fast. Thank you very much. You've just answered what is Chanuka. What is this? Well, it's not a cup of tea, and it's not a flashlight. Well, it actually is a flashlight. It's not a cup of tea, and it's not a bowl of pasta. I haven't told you what it is, but on the other hand, that is the formula of Megillat Ta'anit, days on which we don't eulogize and don't fast. Now we hear the story. For when the Greeks entered the temple, they defiled all the oils in the temple. And when the kingdom, Malchut Hashmonai, when the kingdom of the Maccabees, of the Hashmonaim, prevailed and was victorious over them, they searched and found only one flask of oil that was set aside with the seal of the high priest, and it contained only enough to kindle the menorah for 1 day. A miracle occurred in it, and they lit it for 8 days. The following year, they established and celebrated them as a festival with praise and thanksgiving. My friends, if you just look at the Talmud, you would think to yourself that the great clash between Judaism and the Greek Empire, between Israel and the Greek Empire, was all about sacred oil. And what saved the day was that one flask of oil that burnt for 8 days. Rambam doesn't tell the story that way. Al-Hanisim, which we recite in the Siddur, doesn't tell the story that day. We read there, Bimei Matityahu ben Yochanan, Kohen Gadol Hashmonai Uvanav. I'll read this in English. In the days of Matityahu ben Yochanan, when the evil Greek kingdom stood upon your nation, Israel, to make them forget your Torah, to make them violate your laws, and you, in your great mercy, stood fast behind them, in their time of tribulation. You handed over the mighty into the hands of the weak, the many, Rabim Biyad Ma'atim, into the hands of the few, the evil into the hands of the righteous, the impure into the hands of the pure, and the wicked into the hands of those who occupied your temple. That's as far as I'm going to share. And now I'm going to comment. It seems to me that throughout history, there was a certain amount of ambivalence toward the Chanuka story. And we find that ambivalence expressed in the Talmud, where the military victory, the deliverance, the great deliverance, which we hear about, which we speak about in our prayer, al hanisim va'al ha'polkan va'al ha'gvorot va'al ha'tshuot va'al ha'milchamot she'asita l'avotenu. We hear that story in our prayers, in the way the Siddur was compiled. We hear that story in the Rambam. I didn't bring you the Rambam, but if you read the Rambam, it's all there. We don't hear that story in the Talmud. And it seems to me that the commemoration moved from the altar to the menorah. There's a very big difference between the altar and the menorah. The altar is a place for sacrifice. The menorah is a place for life. If you read the history of the Chanuka story, it's there to some extent in the Rambam. It's very much there in the book of Maccabees. And in the book of Maccabees, we hear about the zealots who fought the war. We hear all about the Hellenizing Jews. And as a matter of fact, if you know your history, and the great historian Avigdor Cherikover, the first generation of historians to graduate a university in Israel, he was one of the first graduates of the Hebrew University. He explains to us, based upon the book of Maccabees, that the war broke out not Jews against Greeks, not as a rebellion of the Jews against the Greeks. The Greeks were not religious fanatics. They never legislated anywhere outside of the Eretz Yisrael, gezerot, religious decrees prohibiting any religious behavior. As a matter of fact, the Greeks were known throughout the world as being inclusive. The local deities were always invited into their pantheon. The collision was with Jews who were fighting Hellenization by other Jews. That's the story of Chanuka, which Chazal do not tell us. They don't tell us that. We don't have a Haggadah. We have a mitzvah of publicizing the miracle, but we don't have a Haggadah because the story is a story that without which the Jewish people would not have survived this. We would have assimilated into the Hellenistic Empire as every other nation did. However, zealotry is something which is at certain points in history needed, but Chazal felt it is not what must be institutionalized. What must be institutionalized is adding light. What must be institutionalized is illuminating the public space. And from here, we go back to the Chanuka observances. The observance is intended to be not in the home. There's no other mitzvah during the year which we must observe in the public domain. Doesn't exist. We go to, we have gatherings of Jews. Gatherings of Jews are generally in the synagogue. We go to shul, we read the Megillah in shul. We pray in shul. When we have fast days, we commemorate them. It is, they tell me, that on fast days during the time of the temple, they moved the amud, they moved the prayer table into the street and all congregated there. That's the only other mitzvah that we have that takes place in the street. Of course, there was the procession of Bikurim, and when people brought the first fruits up to Jerusalem, and that was very much ritualized by Hashar Holech Lifnehem. The Mishnah tells us that there was an ox that paraded at the front of the parade, and its horns were covered with gold, and this is the way people carried their fruits to bring them to the temple. But the mitzvah of Bikurim takes place in the temple. Same way that Mishloach Manot, carrying on Purim Manot from one house to another house, doesn't take place in the street. It takes place when I take something from my home and I bring it into your home. But Hanukkah is different. Hanukkah is about lighting those lights, not on the table. It is not a family-centered holiday. My childhood memories are of a family-centered holiday. That's the way we did it when I was growing up in Spring Valley, New York. The family gathered together. There generally was a very large family gathering on Hanukkah, but on most nights, the family gathered together. We lit the Hanukkah candles. We sang Ma'oz Tzur. We played with the dreidel. That all took place in the home. And on the other hand, what we see in Eretz Yisrael today is so beautiful. It's a return to the mitzvah as it was intended, of lighting those Hanukkah candles outside in the public domain. As I said, Hanukkah was the Hanukkah of the altar, the consecration, the rebuilding of the altar, the consecration of the altar. But it's not that Chazal decided to commemorate. It is not the zealotry. The zealotry was needed in its time, but the light, the healing, the unity, the bringing together, the placement of the miracle as the property of all of the people, that's something which is singular to Hanukkah. And I think in Israel, we very much feel that during Hanukkah. We feel that the holiday is a holiday not just of the religious, it's a holiday of everyone in Israel. We all celebrate it, and we celebrate it in which we emphasize whatever is meaningful to us, but the story, the Chanuka story, is told in every kindergarten in Israel. Chanuka songs are sung by children wherever. And when we go out in the street and we light those Chanuka candles, and those Chanuka candles remain burning, I think it's a message for our time more than ever before. We're here tonight in this learning, which will take place for 24 hours, while we have Chayalim outside. It's raining very hard here in Israel. I'm thinking of my son, I'm thinking of my son-in-law, who are called up, and I'm thinking of all of our children. The Chayalim are all of our children. I'm hoping everyone has warm clothing. I don't know whether it's raining in Gaza. I think it probably is. But if I look at our society, say to myself, there's a message of the month of Kislev, and there's a message of Hanukkah, which is more relevant than ever today. My friends, Israel had 5 series of elections in 4 years. I've had the privilege of living in Israel. It's what Nishmat's Rabbi Sperling calls living the 25th book of Tanakh. Most people will say Tanakh has 24 books, and his answer is, there's a 25th book. It's being written today by HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the land of Israel, and we're all players in it. And I think during this war, we've seen that Jews are all players in that book, no matter where they live. Everybody, every Jew is connected with the state of Israel, and the state of Israel is dependent upon every Jew. So here in Israel, what does it mean to have 5 elections in 4 years? The results of the elections were identical pretty much 5 times. And that's that the country is split down the middle. I'm not talking about this particular party or that particular party, but when one looks at the Tashtite Munit, when one looks at the larger belief system which animate the people of Israel, it was obvious that we had parted into 2 societies. And I'm pleased to see the comment that we just got that the rain is a blessing because it's flushing Hamas out of the tunnels, which would be a very, very, very good thing. In any event, we had these 5 elections. The spirit in Israel today is not the spirit of those 5 elections. We've come together. We've come together because the Jewish neshama burns stronger with a stronger fire, a stronger light than all the divisiveness in our country. And it sometimes takes a war to remind us that what binds us together is far, far greater than what separates us. And beside all of the horror of this war, the dreadful, dreadful horror, savage horror of this war, I think there's a good side that we're going to be left with. And that's the light. That's the light of Chanuka. That's the light of Am Yisrael Chai. When we all say Am Yisrael Chai, I believe that what is the spirit of the Jewish people is expressing itself. It's expressed itself in the numbers of Chayalim who showed up. My son told me that in his unit, when there was the call-up, not just was there 100% response to the call-up, there was 150%. What does it mean 150%? People sometimes say it's 150% or it's 200% true. And you don't need to be 200% true. You need to be 100% true. But what's 150% call-up? It means that way more soldiers than were called up showed up, because that's the feeling in this country today. The feeling is we must be part of this. We don't want this. None of us wanted this horror that is taking place, that has taken place, and until we wipe out Hamas, this evil Amalek, this evil treacherous enemy will continue showing its evil head. we know we must wipe out Hamas. But the day after, when we return to civilian life, I don't think the day after is going to be so clear. I think the exit from this war will probably take maybe even a period of months. But I'm not I'm not in the know. That's just as a 50 plus year citizen of Israel. That's what my feeling is. I've lived through many, many wars, but I have never seen what I'm seeing today in the unity that is tying us all together. The unity of heartbreak, but also the unity of resolve. There is tremendous, tremendous resolve here in Israel. And I think this year, when we light Chanuka candles, what we should be remembering is the place of that light. It's a national light. It's not a family light. It's not a personal light. We have so many mitzvot which are personal mitzvot. I make a bracha when I eat an apple. Someone else doesn't make a bracha for me. I need to pray. I need to perform so many of the mitzvot, both negative mitzvot and positive mitzvot. Some of the mitzvot are family-centered, as Shabbat is in so many ways, as Shabbat candles are. But that's not Hanukkah. Hanukkah is lighting up the street. And my own prayer, after, God willing, we see the fulfillment of all of our prayers, the return of the hostages, and the successful culmination of this war and of the destruction of the evil forces. It's our job to light those lights. And whether the war is over before Hanukkah or after Hanukkah, it's the message of Hanukkah. May we be blessed with the fulfillment of the fulfillment of those of all of our prayers, and may we have the inner strength to rise to the task of not accepting a return to divisiveness. You know, with the candle, you have two candles. Doesn't matter if one is made out of paraffin and the other candle is made out of olive oil. You put the two candles together and they form one fire. One candle can be tall and skinny. The other candle can be tall, short, and fat. One candle can be manufactured in this part of the world, the other in that part of the world. One of them can be braided, and the other candle is created by a mold. Doesn't matter. You put them together, and they burn together in one fire. You put more and more and more candles together and get a great fire, get a great light. May all of us Jews together merge our Hanukkah candles into a light for Israel and a light for the world, and may this continue. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
The floor is open for questions if anybody wants. On the chat, please. Thank you.
Leora, I want to thank you, and I would like to thank yourself and Julie, Nishmat's Julie Weissman, for putting together this day together with Rabbanit Atara Ice, who stewarded us all. I thank you both, And I thank all who joined us. Shalom, shalom. Oh, there was a question here, just a minute. It flashed off the screen for a moment. Could I send my source sheets from Dr. Ann Shinar? I can do so with pleasure. I will send the source sheets to Leora at Nishmat, and she will be able to share them. I didn't read that last one. There was, can it be, let's see, what do I think Jews of Israel should do to strengthen what?
The klal. It says.
What should we do to strengthen the klal? I always believe that the most I can do is look inward at myself, not tell someone else what to do, but see what I can do. And I think what I can do is remember back 50, I think it's probably 52 years or 53 years, when Rav Henkin Zichrono Livracha and I moved to Israel. We had relatives then in North Tel Aviv. They were not observant Jews. They were what I call salt of the earth. They were chalutzim. They came to Israel from Poland, and they built roads, and they worked. These were very bright people, but they worked physically building our state before the state was established. They came from Europe before the Holocaust. And in our first year in Israel, Rav Henkin and I used to visit them a great deal. We lived in Tel Aviv here, and we used to visit them. It didn't matter to us that they were Filoni. We didn't look at them and give them marks on how religious or unreligious they were. For us, they were family. We didn't think in terms of Chiloni. Of course, I wish that everyone would observe mitzvot, but when I came to their house, we used to eat clementino, like tangerines and tea biscuits. And we used to drink water because that's what we could eat in their house. And those were really such good tea biscuits. They would open the package for us. And of course, it had a hechsher, and we'd have the clementino, and I would set aside trumot masrot into a plastic bag that I brought before we would eat. I don't know if they noticed my doing it. In any event, both from the way they looked at us and we looked at them, they were family. And we weren't there to judge them. They were family. And when I look now at Israel, I think that what we could all do is remember we are family and do those deeds which bring us together, which stress that we're family. And in a family, when parents face the fact that they have a child who is unobservant, it's with a lot of pain, but a lot of love. And one acts wisely and doesn't fight over things. And I think those are some lessons that we need to learn to put that at the top of our list. We are family. We're a nation. But more than we're a nation, we're a family. Thank you all, and may the month of Kislev bring us light and warmth for all Israel. And may our prayers be answered for the hostages to be returned, for the Chayalim to be safe, and may this be an Ilui Neshama for all of the precious fallen. Shalom, shalom.